Well, I mentioned before that Ben Gurley and I had this interesting relationship, which is he actually listened to me, which was a very novel thing for me, because most people think I'm a bit crazy or something, but every suggestion I made for a change to the computer design, he liked and implemented it, and this was blew my mind in a way. So I kind of idolized him, and he was what I would call the master of simplicity. He did things very, very simply. I had another friend who was a great architect called John Koch, and he was the master of complexity. He would build designs. He once showed me his latest design for a divide circuit that made an estimated 8-bit trial divisor. I don't want to go into details, but it was so complicated almost no one in the world could understand it. And okay, so a very funny incident happened at III in its early days, which is I got Ben Gurley to agree to leave digital and join III. This was, III was about a 4-man company, 5-man or so, and a few students who worked part-time. And digital was this very successful company, and was roaring along selling PDP-1s and PDP-4s and, going gung-ho. And Gurley decided to leave and join my company. And so we went into, Ben asked me, I had organized a meeting at System Development Corporation here in Santa Monica, and I wanted Ben to come with me, so he agreed that he would, quit digital and come. So he told his boss, Ken Olson, who was the CEO and founder of digital. So Ken asked to see both of us. So we both go into Ken Olson's office. Ken says to Ben, Ben, why didn't you talk to me about something, He's about to lose his only great computer architect, and he's got a computer company. And Ben said, well, I couldn't talk to you because every time someone would talk to you and say something like, this other computer company has offered me a job, you would interrupt them and say, pack up your things and get out. And so, I'll never forget, Ken Olson said, yes, Ben, I do say that, but I say that to other people, not to you. I would never say that to you. So anyway, so he asked us to do him a favor, which was, he said, would you not announce anything till you come back from this trip you're going to take? So I said, okay. He didn't care. So when we come back, we discover this. Digital had had a company newspaper for a while. Then they gave it up. He resurrected the company newspaper. On the front page of the company newspaper was a picture of Ben Gurley. And it said, the caption I'll never forget, said, Ben Gurley becomes vice president. Okay. And then a very fine print under, as we're announcing that Ben Gurley became vice president of III, and blah, blah, blah. He'll be here in the mill, blah, 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 because my business was in the same mill as digital. So this was his way of announcing it. Wow, any casual observer would conclude that Ben Gurley had just been promoted within the company. It was so that was a great coup. Then the next thing that happened is we got this, one of the things that also prompted him to want to come is I had gotten this order. Remember I talked to you about, I talked earlier about, we read some film for Lincoln Laboratory, and they told the Army to order a machine from us to solve the Army's problem. And that was the PFR-1. We designed this, we were going to build this machine. It was going to cost $500,000 which you can multiply by 10 or 15 to get today's money. So it was a major project, and you know, we had just, there was no one in the company with technical skills other than a few programmers and me, and so Ben Gurley was very essential to that, you know, as you can imagine, because he could design analog circuits, which we needed, and he could do digital systems and all that stuff. So what happened is, we came back from California, and we're working at the company and so on. When I left BBN, when I was at BBN, there was a friend of mine who was technically very competent and who was also, you know, he's a pal from grammar school days. We were both pilots in the Air Force, and he was a fighter pilot in the Air Force. I talked him into leaving and coming to BBN, but by the time he did that, I had left. So I was now trying to talk him into leaving BBN and coming to my company, Information International. So I was telling Ben about him, and Ben knew him. That was Bill Fletcher. And so Ben said to me, look, you're his pal and so on. Why don't you let me make him the offer? He'll think it's more businesslike, and then he'll more likely to come. So Ben made him an offer, and he decided he'd come. So the three of us were three technical people. We could do that job for the Army. Okay. So what happened is other things, but to make a long story short, Ben Gurley was murdered by Alan Blumenthal, a fellow employee at Digital, who shot him through the window while he was at the dining room table having dinner with his wife and his 7 children. Shot him in the head with a single slug from a shotgun. And the police, he had reported to the police that this guy was parking his car outside across the street from his house. And the police said they'd send a squad car around every so often, okay? But the next event was, and I tried to talk him into leaving his house with his family and staying at our house, but he said, I've got an old rifle, I'm gonna get it out and have it just in case he shows up or something. He didn't show up that way, he shot him through the window, okay? I was at work, and he lived in Concord, and the company was in Maynard. It's about 3 miles from his home, where our office was. I was at work still, and he was gone home for dinner and was going to come back, because we were working on this, building this machine for the Army. So his wife called me when he was shot, and I went down there, and they'd already removed his body, and the kids had been taken somewhere else, and, you know, this was, the police went and picked this guy up. They went to his home in in one of the suburbs of Boston, and he wasn't there, and they waited. He drove up. They said, where have you been? He said, none of your business. And they said, open the trunk of your car, and he wouldn't, and they pried it open, and there was a shotgun. And they smelled it. It had been recently fired, and they hauled him and put him into jail. Down, okay. Then what happened is very bizarre. The grand jury that met not long later were outraged at the police department's incompetence. No one in the police department of Concord is a little town in Massachusetts, you know, historic, very important historically. No one in the police department, including the chief, had ever been involved in a murder case, okay? They didn't read him his rights. They didn't get a search warrant, which they needed to open the trunk of his car, so on and so forth. So they refused to indict him. So they had to release him. So then what happened is, you know, they released him. So Alan Blumenthal is set free. Oh, by the way, one other incident happened. Some rabbi read in the paper, Alan Blumenthal in jail for murder, blah, blah. So he thought, oh, that's a Jewish-sounding name. I'll go talk to him. So he goes and talks to him, and Blumenthal says, I did it, I killed him. So he rushes to the chief of police and says, he told me he killed him, you know, so on and so forth. Of course, the police, you know, didn't mention this at the they didn't mention it at the grand jury because there was a law in Massachusetts that a confession to a priest cannot be used in court. And all this time, this rabbi says, I'm not a priest, you know. I don't think he said, damn it, but he acted like he, you know, and I want to testify. He's a murderer. He told me he did it, you know, and so on. Okay, so they let Blumenthal out. So here's how Blumenthal left the jail. He says, I want to see the chief of police. So he goes to the chief's office, and he says, I want my shotgun. And the chief was taken aback. He didn't, you know, I spoke to him about this, and this story I got from the chief, okay. Here's what happened. The chief said, I don't know where your shotgun is right now, but I'll find it eventually and we'll get it back to you. And Blumenthal cursed him out. Said, you have no right to keep my shotgun, I want it back. Okay. Blumenthal wasn't happy. He looked down at the chief's desk and picked up an envelope and says, is this your home address? The chief says, what's it to you? And he says, I'm adding you to my list. He made it known he had a list of people to kill. So I went down to see the DA and say, what are you going to do about this? And they said, well, you know, you want us to do something about it? I said, yeah. And he said, well, here's what you can do. Go to the state legislature and see if you can get more money appropriated to my office. And if you do that, then I'll do something about it. Okay. And Blumenthal was a madman, you know. I went to my chief of police and Natick, where I lived then, and I said, have you heard about the Blumenthal case? He said, no one in this department is talking about anything else. I thought that was funny. And I said, well, what do you think? What should I do? Or what are you going to do? And he said, well, I could tell you the same thing the Concord chief will send a patrol car around every so often. But what good would that do you? It didn't do, you know, Gurley any good. So I said, well, what should I do? He said, okay. He said, he asked me some questions like, you know, I was in the military, you know, did I ever use a weapon? Well, I had to qualify with the Colt 45 in the military, you know, in the range and so on. So he said, here, take this, go down to the gun shop in this mall down the street and get everything on this list and bring it back to me in a bag. Okay, so I came back and I brought back about a .38 special and so on and so forth. And he gave me, so he said, okay, now he said, pretend I'm Blumenthal and I'm about to shoot you. What are you going to do? So we had carefully unloaded the gun. So I take the gun out and go bang like that. And he says, what? He says to me, what did you just do? I said, I shot you in the leg. He said, why'd you do that? He said, I said, well, you know, if I shoot you in the leg, you'll fall down and then I'll call the police and they'll cut you away. He shook his head and he said, listen, do you know the average distance a policeman is killed? The average distance his assailant was from him when he was killed? And I said, no, I don't know what it is. He says it's 6 feet. I thought, well, that's interesting. He said, here, give me the gun and I'm going to be, you know, you be Alan Blumenthal and I'll be you. Okay. So I say, oh, okay, so now he has the gun. It's in a holster someplace, and he's just sitting there like that. And he says, okay, do something. So I pretend like I'm going for my gun, and I go like that, and he whips out this little, it's a 5-shot thing. I say, what the hell did you do? He said, I just shot you 5 times. And I said, why? He said, you know the average distance between a policeman and the guy who kills him is like 8 feet. You don't have any time. He says your only hope is you defend yourself against this guy, and you carry this gun, you never have it, you never go anywhere without it, and you're prepared to shoot every bullet, the first hostile thing he does. And to me, this is everything against everything I ever thought. You know, it's a very strange thing to have the police teaching you how to kill someone, but that's what he did. I had sent my wife and kids away. You see, what happened is Blumenthal knew I was trying to get him in jail. He just killed my best friend, okay? So then the next thing that came up is Blumenthal, everyone wanted to get Blumenthal in jail somehow. He had 2 children, and his wife had died under some mysterious circumstances. Got suddenly ill and died. Some people thought he poisoned her. Anyway, so his mother-in-law lived in the house and took care of his kids. She went to the police and said, he's threatened to kill me. So they arrested Blumenthal. They brought him before a judge. And, you know, there was this testimony and so on. We thought at last he's going to get put away. And, you know, we hoped he would end up being charged with murder and so on. So what happened is it came to the judge, and the judge asked, after evidence was presented, and the judge said, tell me, what was your reaction when Blumenthal threatened to kill you? She said, it made me mad as hell, she said. And the judge said, I understand, he said. You know, in Massachusetts, it's a crime to put someone in fear of their life. But anger is a different emotion than fear. Case dismissed, and Blumenthal's free. Okay. So on his list to kill is also Ken Olsen, the CEO of Digital. He let it be known he had like 10 people on his list. He'd tell anybody, they're on my list, and you know what that meant. So Ken Olsen, you know, he's a busy guy. He's running this big company. He calls a private detective agency and says, look, I just can't go into hiding or something, and you got to follow this guy and protect me in case, you know, he tries to kill me. So they said, yes, but we can't do it with just one man. We have to have 2. And, you know, it turns out that 24 hours a day, 2 men, that turns out you need 10 full-time employees. Okay, that's what they had. They followed him all the time. Of course, Blumenthal did not like being followed. But, okay. So, you know, he goes with his 2 girls, and everywhere as he drove, you know, this car is following him with 2 detectives in it. So he stops at a mall and parks right near the entrance, leaves the girls in the car, and goes in. So the detectives pull in front of his car, and one of them stays in the car, and the other follows him into the mall. He walks slow all the way to the far end of the mall, then does something and starts running for the entrance, and gets ahead of the guy, the detective. He's running back, okay? And the detective's running after him. So Blumenthal, the detectives had pulled in front of Blumenthal's car. So what happens is Blumenthal runs between the 2 cars, gets back into his car, and the detective is running out. Blumenthal's in his car, he gets it started, and he waits, and as the detective is between Blumenthal's car and the detective's car, he jerks his car forward and smashes into the detective's car to kill the guy. The guy, by some miracle, leaps onto the hood of Blumenthal's car and is not seriously injured. So you say, My God, he tried to kill, so the detective agency is, this guy's a murderer. He just tried to kill one of our detectives. So it goes before the same judge, okay. And what does that judge say? If someone was following me around 24 hours a day all the time, I'd do the same thing. Case dismissed again. So he's free again. This was driving us nuts, okay? And I hired I hired two people. I hired a lawyer and said, pretend you're the DA, get the evidence. And I hired someone else. It was all completely crazy. So what happened is finally, Massachusetts had passed a law that said anyone can bring a case before a grand jury. So it didn't have to be the DA. So we started to bring it before a grand jury. And what happened is the last minute, I guess the DA decided that it would be embarrassing to him. So he came to me and said, look, if you give me all the evidence you guys have collected, I'll bring it to the grand jury. So we said, I could have punched him out, but we said, okay, because I knew he had a better chance. So he brought it before the grand jury. Blumenthal was indicted for murder, but they decided he was criminally insane, which was correct. And so he was held in some insane asylum for the criminally insane until he could stand trial. And from then on, every year, Blumenthal tried to get out and didn't quite succeed, okay, until he finally, at some point, died while there after about almost 20 years of so on. So that was part of this history of early days at III. And what happened is, when in the midst of all that, I had to deal with this order for the PFR3, and I thought, well, I'm going to get Bill Fletcher. He's very competent, But right after Gurley was killed, Bill Fletcher came in to me and he said, look, you're a friend and so on.